Welcome back everyone to another Retro Wednesday, and today we're looking at something really interesting. We're moving on from the Atomic Wave arcade board, and we're going to move on to the Capcom Power System 2.0. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of an overview today of how this thing worked, what it was all about, a little bit of a history and a review of the CPS-2 system, which is what this is. Now, there's a lot I got to say about this, so hopefully this video won't be 4 hours long, but let's go ahead and begin. So, to begin with, the CPS-2 was the follow-up to the CPS-1, which was released in 1998, and it lasted until around 1995 or so. Now, the big difference between the CPS-1 and the CPS-2 is that the CPS-2 followed more the structure of the Neo Geo MVS, whereby you had like a plastic shell or like an encased motherboard. This here is the A board, okay? So think of this like your Super Nintendo, and a massive cartridge would fit in on top of this being the B board. Now with the CPS-1 system, it was the exact same thing, except that it was all PCBs, so it was just the boards themselves, the silicon with all the chips and everything like that, but it was the same idea. So you had like a base board, and then another board would sit on top of that. But when they came up with the CPS-2 system, Capcom was like, no, maybe we should do something more in line with the Neo Geo. So they have this one base unit. So this is the motherboard. These pins here you see are what the cart or the other PCB would connect into. So this is pretty much it. If you own one of these, you're pretty much set to play all the CPS-2 games. You just got to go and buy the individual games. And arcade owners loved this because they didn't have to buy entirely new cabinets. Again, the same idea as what as what SNK had for things like Top Hunter here. Okay, like with their Neo Geo system, you would put it in shlunk into the MVS. So Capcom had the exact same thing, but as you'll see, they're slightly larger than this. Alright, so why did they come out with this? Was it strictly for power? Well, not entirely. You see, the CPS-1 system had some awesome games, most notably the original first 3 Street Fighter games, as well as Final Fight. I believe there was even Ghouls and Ghosts. There was a whole whackload of games released on the CPS-1 system, but there was one big problem, and that is piracy. Piracy ran rampant with the original CPS system. So Capcom wanted to have something to fight back, and that's where this bad boy came into play. So first, let's go over some of the basic features of this thing. Now, this one was ripped from an arcade here in Montreal that was used a lot. So it's not in the best shape, but you know what? It works perfectly, so what the hell. Okay, so I'm going to be moving around here a little bit. So, I already said you have your pins, so the game would sit in like that. You'll notice in the back you have a fan. Now this fan is terribly loud. I have tried my absolute best to clean this up. It was so full of nicotine and dust and dirt and blah. But I've totally removed this. You'll notice here you've got like Capcom, it says void, because if you remove these back in the day, you would void your warranty. Obviously, no warranties today. So anyways, this fan, you can actually replace this because it's so bloody loud. Nothing really fancy here. You have area for feet where you could plug it in underneath to your arcade board. Can you guys make that out? It just says what the serial number is. Nothing too fancy, right? Like on the sides, but you'll notice on this side, dun dun dun, besides the scratches, you have a test switch, and then you have a volume up and down button. Nothing overly fancy. However, on the front of this unit, things get really interesting because you have your JAMA connector here, and then you've got your kick harness right here. The kick harness is what allowed you to, well, have the kick buttons for games like, well, Street Fighter or the Versus series, or everything else. And then you had your stereo out, which was a big deal. Having stereo out rocked. And you could change all of this in the BIOS, which is what I'm going to show you guys ever so briefly at the end of this video. So now that you get a basic idea of how this worked, how did it stop piracy? Because that doesn't make any sense. This, what I just explained, is just a basic system. Well, I'm going to show you. So I'm going to move this off to the side. And now you're going to hear a lot of background noise because I've got boxes and boxes of these games. So, here's a look at a game that I've covered a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. This is X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Notice the cartridge size. It's huge! I mean, my God. Here's a Super Nintendo, Ken Griffey Jr., and here's a Neo Geo game. This thing can eat both of them and spit them out for breakfast, okay? What's interesting, though, is this obviously is a home console game. But this isn't. This is an actual arcade game. So that's interesting, right? Because so is this. How the, like, what? Huh? So, very simply put, if you turn this around, you'll see very clearly that these line up, these pins line up, okay? Now, I don't pretend to be an expert here, guys, okay? I'm not going to go through absolutely everything and all these different features because I don't know. I am what you call a casual arcade fan, leading into a hardcore one, but I'm not a full hardcore arcade fan because, well, I just don't have space. So you can see how really easy these things set up. You see they line up with these, those line up with those, and away you go. Notice it says void here too. Well, there's a reason for that on these games, and now I'm going to explain into it. I was originally going to open it up, but I'm not going to. Instead, I'm just going to talk to you, because the more you open these things up, there's little clasps inside and they can break. There's nothing too fancy on this, except for in the front here, which, if I pull it up, it says register, communication out, and communication in. It's because some games supported network features, not online network, but where you could connect them to each other. So you could have like a tournament version of Street Fighter, which there is one, which is pretty cool. All right, so the rest is just, you see, you can see all the way through to the other end of my ottoman here. You can just see there's just venting areas, and I've gone through and cleaned up all of these. Okay, so piracy. Let's wrap that up, that discussion. Inside each one of these cartridges is something like, where is it? There it is. That. I don't know if you can see this. It is a battery with two leads coming out, okay? Positive and negative. You have to replace this battery inside this board every 5 to 10 years, something like that. It really depends, though. It really depends on how long the game's been sitting. So it draws just a little bit of power in order to keep essentially encryption alive. Now again, that's why I said I'm not like a hardcore, you know, Omega Uber arcade gamer. So I'm just going to explain very, very loosely. Essentially what happens is, if that battery dies, your game can't function. It won't play, because essentially that battery is what allows the game to say, oh, yeah, I have these encryption tables. I know how to decode what I need to decode in order to play the game. Simple as that, okay? Yes, it's super technical. People can get into it and explain it all. But that we now refer to as a suicide battery. Because when that battery goes, your game is dead. Or is it? A couple of years back, someone, I don't even remember who it is now, actually learned how to Phoenix these games. So if your game is dead, don't throw it out. And the way you know it's dead is when you connect it up. If you get like a blue screen, it's all fuzzy and whatever, it's dead. All you got to do is take out the ROMs, a couple of them, ship them off to, I'm not sure if it's actually Razula. I'm not sure. The guy who did the Unibios for the Neo Geo. But anyways, I apologize. I'm not sure. But you mail it off to this guy, or you can even do it yourself. You flash them, and basically it removes the encryption tables so that they'll play forever without the batteries. Now the batteries, it's a minor inconvenience. Really, it's not hard. I don't have soldering skills, and I'm able to change the batteries. It's really not hard. You just go remove the solder, put it in, and resolder it on. You're done. It's really that simple. But this is what allowed Capcom to fight all of the piracy that was going on with their particular hardware, which was on the CPS-1. So what was released on the CPS-1 that people would want to pirate so much? A little game called Street Fighter II. It was crazy. You had to be so careful. You still do. If you want to buy an arcade of Street Fighter II, you make damn sure it's the original one and not a bootleg copy, because they are everywhere. Same deal with many of the CPS-1 games. This prevented all of that. This basically solved their solution. Well, they solved their solution, solved their problem. And it was a really genius way of doing it. And it was years before the encryption was actually broken and people figured out how to go about cracking these in order to get them to work. So that's, in essence, that's essentially what the CPS-2 did that was different. Now this, naturally, they had the opportunity, so they made the motherboard stronger than the CPS-1. Now, something else I want to say. You notice this is blue? Well, blue represents North America. There was also green, which represents Japan, and then there's a wide variety of other colors. Now, I can't confirm or talk about all the different colors because I only know what I have, right? What I can tell you is that the blue USA here, the pinouts, these things, match up obviously with the blue here, but also with the green. Now, interestingly, unlike the Neo Geo, where everything depended on your board, where did you get your board? If it was a Japanese board, all your games would be Japanese. If your board was North American, all your games would be North American, sort of like the AES, the home console of the Neo Geo. But with the CPS-2, the motherboard's actually irrelevant. It all comes down to the game. So if your game is blue, it's going to be a North American game, and if it's green, it's going to be a Japanese game. So those I know work together. They're cross-compatible. The pinouts are identical. However, some of the other colors that were released for like Asia, other places in Asia and Central America, or I'm not sure the regions and stuff, but they will have different pinouts. They won't work, is essentially what I'm saying. So if you have a Japanese motherboard, you're still good. You could still play this game. Okay? I hope that makes sense. So the suicide battery in this really did fix up the piracy. The first game that launched on the CPS-2 was Super Street Fighter II, The New Challengers, in September of 1993. And believe it or not, this would last 10 years, up to 2003, and the last release was Hyper Street Fighter II, the Anniversary Edition, which is like a $500 game now. And interestingly enough, Capcom would follow this up with a CPS-3 system, which we're going to look at in about a month's time. I'm going to cover 4 arcade reviews on the CPS-2 before moving on to the CPS-3, but we're going to come back after. I have other games. I just don't want to, bore you guys to death with hundreds of reviews of this K. Hundreds is a little exaggerating. Anyways, Capcom followed up the CPS-3 in 1996, but it proved to be not as popular as the CPS-2, and so, believe it or not, they were actually making CPS-2 games after the CPS-3 was already done, which I always thought was interesting. So that's pretty much a look at the CPS-2. My review, what do I think of it? It's a brilliant hardware. It really is. It's nice how everything is closed. Like, you get these nice shells here, which is wonderful because it makes storing them a lot easier. For those that are interested, what I do is I simply have boxes like this. I've got labels I want to print up. I just haven't had an opportunity, and I usually put anti-static bubble wrap in them, and I just sit them inside face down, so I store them like this so that if the battery ever were to leak, it will leak onto the plastic shell. So, now what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to give my hardcore fans, a little bit of an insight into the games that I'm going to be covering. I'm going to put 4 games down, and I'm not going to talk about them. I'm just going to show you what you can expect over the months ahead, okay? Well, months ahead, the next 4 weeks. So, we're going to be starting out, well, actually that's a lie. I don't know if we're going to start with it, but we're going to have, dun dun dun, this bad boy right here, which I just picked up recently, which is Dungeons & Dragons: The Tower of Doom. Notice, this is still sealed, okay? This bad boy has never actually had its battery changed, which is insane. So the gentleman that I purchased it from was super kind. Whoa, geez Louise. You will never believe what he did, which I thought was super, super cool. So first off, he included a battery, so I could change this. But that's not all he did. He actually sent me the ROMs that you need to flash if you want to Phoenix a board. Now, I forgot to mention, if you do Phoenix a board, what's really cool is not only do they come back from the dead, but then you can actually change the region. So for example, this is a North American one. What if I had the Japanese one? It's going to all be in Japanese, right? Well, if you Phoenix it, if I send these out and get them flashed, I could Phoenix it and then I would be able to switch the language before the game boots. So I may have to do that with this one. I haven't had a chance to change out the battery. Hopefully I'll get a chance maybe today to do that or over the weekend. But what's great is this is another set. These are all legit. You can see it says right on there Capcom. These are all real ROMs that I could get flashed, and then I would have basically 2 working versions of Dungeons & Dragons Tower of Doom. Okay, so that's that one. That one's going to be coming up fairly soon. Alright, the next one. I never remember what it's actually called. I think it's, yeah, oh, it's in English. Look at that. Okay, so here we go. Perfect example. This is a Japanese one. But this does work flawlessly on that. And what is it? We come on down. That's right. It's Dungeons & Dragons Shadow over Mystara. And you'll see, same thing, same exact thing. So that's one you can look forward to. Then I'm going to be covering this one right here, which is quite a rare game these days. And if you can see what it is, dum, 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 Pocket Fighter. Really looking forward to covering this one. I covered this on the Saturn way back when, but looking forward to this. And yes, it's the Japanese version, so it'll be in Japanese. But you know what? Who cares? And finally, we'll end off with a look at another Japanese game. This one is Cyberbots. So those are the 4 games that I'm going to be covering. I'm going to cover the 2 Dungeons & Dragons games, Cyberbots, and Pocket Fighter. And yes, most of them will be in Japanese, but that's just the way these things go. I do have more CPS-2 games. They're in storage, though. But I'm planning on picking up a few more as the days go on. You'll notice this one's missing a button. For shame. So that's it. That's pretty much what I'm going to be doing over the next 4 weeks. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Capcom Power System II. And after we're done with these 4 reviews, I'll be taking a look at the CPS-3 hardware, and we're going to be taking a look at all 6 of those games, and I'll explain how that works. I no longer use the original CPS-3. What I mean by that, you'll understand more in the next video like this, but essentially I have a dark soft, I guess you would call it mod, but I'll explain it all. Basically, it's a new BIOS that allows me to bypass the suicide carts that are for that particular system. But with these, they're all original. I don't have any Phoenix games. I change out the batteries about every 6 years or so. Alright guys, so that's it. Now we're going to take a look just very, very simply at the BIOS features of the system, and then we will say that will be it.
The CPS system is quite simple actually. Once you press the test button, you will be booted into the BIOS, which is what you see right here. And it's really, really simple. All the games have their own unique things, but you can see there's system configuration. Here I'm going to put this game on baby mode. But you'll also have access to like a sound mode. You'll have access to input, output, and then to test the memory, things like that. It's really, really simple. So that's pretty much the end of it, guys, in terms of the CPS-2 system. I will be back after I review about 4 games, the ones I showed you guys. I'll be back showing you a look at the Capcom Power System II. But that'll be in 4 weeks from now. Alright guys, hope you enjoyed the overview and the review. Take care.